such a difficult time. We're now in the third wave. This is going on, well past the year. People are experiencing moral injury, compassion fatigue. People are experiencing burnout, and you can hear it in the staff, especially when people are getting sick and dying of COVID-19 and they're young and they're essential workers, and you hear the staff talking about, this was so preventable. You hear the staff talking about how if people just had access to paid sick days, things could be so much better. If the vaccine rollout was more equitable, maybe people would have lived and died. It really boils down to a lot of the policy decisions. And I think health workers are resilient. And I think the health workers across Canada would be happy to work through this pandemic, no doubt. But when it comes to the governments working against them and failing them, that's a different story.
Dr. Vashani, what do you make of what's going on at the airports? Every day flights are coming in from spots, including the Brazils and the Indias. And the government is being told, because the government does some testing, the governments, provincial governments, let people know that, X amount of days, X amount of people had COVID or tested for COVID. What do you make of COVID coming into the country relatively? And I don't want to say totally unscreened, but relatively unscreened, because if some people have COVID, we have no idea how many others may be getting COVID in the coming days.
I agree that this is something that needs to be talked about. I know I'm hearing from colleagues who are experts in these areas in infectious disease and in public health that there needs to be policy around our borders so that we don't let COVID-19 come into the country. But I do want to remind listeners that a significant proportion of infections around COVID-19 are happening in workplaces. And there seems to be a lack of support for essential workers to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in workplaces. And what we have to do is look at kind of as you said, relative, where the infections are happening and how we can mitigate that risk. I'm not saying keep the borders open. I'm not saying, we shouldn't be more stringent, but why has there been such a lack of focus on such a key driver of infections, which are workplaces? That's really what I think about with that question.
I've been struggling with this one for a few weeks, and the only thing I can think of is that people who make decisions in government are completely out of touch with people in these workplaces. They're out of touch with how they work. They don't see them. They don't know them. They don't know their families. They don't see how they live. Many of them 2-3 families in relatively small apartments. So my sense is that these are statistics to people who are decision makers, but they don't really represent human beings. I'm not trying to trash the decision makers here, but I just think that sometimes there's a lack of empathy when all you see is numbers and you're out of touch with the people that those numbers represent. Your thought?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I wonder if people are getting numb to the numbers, and as devastating as they are, and I can only imagine that impacts our policymakers and elected officials. We're also hearing reports of the fact that because COVID-19 is like a guided missile that impacts low-income areas and racialized people, many of our elected officials potentially don't even know anyone in their personal lives who got COVID-19. Because
Doctor, I get this all the time on the air. If I open up the phones right now, I'm not going to do that. I'm just
angry callers. Angry callers.
If I open up the phones right now and ask the question, do you know anyone in your life or I could just load the gun this way. If you don't know anyone in your life with COVID-19 and it's driving you crazy to hear nothing but COVID on the news, if you want to call me and tell me that you have nobody in your life who's got COVID and tell me how you feel about this, call me right now. The lines would load up like a Christmas tree. There's zero doubt they'd light right up with a lot of people who would say they know no one with COVID, and within seconds the conversation would turn to, and I don't believe that COVID is as big a deal as people on the radio say it is.
Yeah, and I think this speaks to a societal understanding of who is being impacted by COVID-19. The vast a vast majority of people who are being impacted by this virus are people who live in lower income areas, in dense housing environments, people who are essential workers working in production plants, factories, and so on, people who are racialized and live in racialized communities, and typically people who don't have privilege. And for folks who are able to stay home for work, for example, or who don't have essential work or have, things like paid sick days and have the flexibility of being able to go get a COVID test or whatever is associated with having COVID, you start to see a gap between the haves and the have-nots. And so it doesn't surprise me that there are sections of society who may have more privilege, who don't know anyone who's had COVID. And that tells a story of who's being impacted. And we need to tell that story much beyond the numbers, to your point.
Naheed Dasani is an Ontario-based physician, and he's a health justice activist. Dr. Dasani, always a pleasure having him on the program. If you can get yourself on social media tonight, unless you saw it live, which you may have, but if you didn't, Connor McDavid did another, end-to-ender. Just went through the entire team and made everyone look like a spectator. Nobody can do that in hockey these days. He may be the best ever at doing it. Connor McDavid. Anyway, check him out on Twitter, Facebook, wherever you go, YouTube. You'll definitely find it. NHL.com, I'll guarantee you, has it, because it is. So I know it's just Monday, but it has got to be one of the highlights of the week, no doubt about it. Connor McDavid doing another end-to-end goal. What a performer. In a moment, we'll give you Shane Hewitt with what's coming up next hour, but I want to tell you the show is produced by Jimmy Dappo Ogunsola. Ryan is our technical producer, Ryan V. Hall, and our executive producer is Lady Catherine Stewart. Thank you for joining us on Charles Adler tonight.
I was mocked in the classroom.
Attacked on the bus.
Pushed down on the sidewalk.
We are
your neighbors.
fathers and sons.
Mothers, daughters.
Girl Scouts and Little Leaguers.
We are
The so-called quiet, docile ones.
We live in fear that hides behind soft smiles.
We are being targeted, attacked, killed.
We are
The Asian community.
and we are hurting.
Stand with us.
Follow #StopAsianHate today.
This is Caleb.
Hi.
Caleb loves to speak in the third person.
Caleb sure does.
Caleb also loves his girlfriend, Jenny.
I'm going to make Jenny my life with an L.
So Caleb connected with a diamond specialist from Spence and created a one-of-a-kind engagement ring. And it's backed by the famous Spence lifetime guarantee, just in case.
In case of what? Caleb is feeling verklempt.
Breathe, Caleb.
How
Ready to
would
take
that
the big
question
step?
even make
Call
sense,
or visit
Doug?
SpenceDiamonds.com.
Jesus Christ, how do I attract these fucking people in my life?
Monday through Friday.
Big
Work won't
sign,
evaporate like
still
magic,
ask.
but it will go along at a higher momentum when keeping company with CBS Radio's Winning 7 Cup.
Blind doses to Indians before distributing them to other countries. The BBC's Nigeria correspondent, Naomi Jones, looks now at what this will mean for the country's fight against COVID-19.
Lagos is Nigeria's most populous city, and it's been a real challenge to get its 20 million people vaccinated. So far, it's only received a fraction of the doses it needs. We're at the end of the first phase of vaccination that focused on health and frontline workers, as well as those over 70.
Okay, you have an appointment today?
My name is Ola Bakari. I'm here to get vaccinated today. Obviously, I'm trying to make sure that I don't get infected because of what I do. Basically, we meet a lot of people, and I'm just trying to, protect myself, basically.
Did you have any worries
Thanks
about
for explaining
the
what you
vaccine
do.
coming, or were you confident?
Oh, well, I heard a couple of things, but some of these things do happen. Life is like rolling dice, you take your chances. However, that doesn't mean you wouldn't get vaccinated just to be safe, basically.
Do you know many people who want to get vaccinated?
Oh, obviously, I work in a place, like I said, that, we meet quite a number of people on a daily basis. And because of that, a lot of people are actually open to, getting vaccinated. However, some of these things are actually controlled because the vaccine itself is already available to just anybody. So I think if newer places are opened for people to access, I think a lot of people will be willing to actually get vaccinated.
I'm in a huge sterile waiting room in Yaba Hospital. You can hear the hum of the air conditioners behind me, and there's about 50 people here all waiting to be vaccinated. Some of them are sitting in chairs, others are talking to nurses who are writing down their names.
I want to notice the air
They've
conditioners.
all been allocated a unique vaccination number to show that they've received the vaccine. This is an infectious disease hospital that was initially treating Ebola patients back in 2014. Now it's been repurposed to deal with COVID patients and also vaccinations. One of the people that's been in charge of this inoculation effort is Dr. Bamidele Mutu.
We've vaccinated more than 240,000 people in Lagos State.
So Lagos received some vaccines from the COVAX initiative. How many doses did you receive?
For the COVAX vaccination, we received 507,000 doses, which is of AstraZeneca vaccine. And that means the 2 doses is inclusive in the consignment, which means we can only vaccinate half of what has been received to keep the other half in reserve for the second dose.
Now, admittedly, levels of new COVID cases in West Africa have been pretty low, just dozens of new cases a day here in Nigeria. But there's been an antibody survey released that suggested as many as 4 million people in Lagos alone may have had the virus in the first wave. That's more than has been recorded in the whole of Africa. The problem is misinformation is hindering the vaccination progress. Lagos residents George and Francisca, who were so keen to get the vaccine that they waited 6 hours, are worried others might not because of the misinformation they say is being spread by some religious leaders.
There's a lot of conspiracy theories, especially from religious leaders. They will tell them all kinds of things. In fact, most recently, I saw a video of one religious leader talking about how you could be vaccinated and then you start acting like you have cravings like you're a vampire and you want to drink blood. So those are the kind of things people have been fed with, and they're scared to get vaccinated.
George, why do you think that there is this skepticism? I mean, Francisca's mentioned religious leaders. Are there other reasons?
Yes, I believe the lack of sufficient knowledge about the ease of getting information that is not vetted is very high. So a lot of people just get these short clips and telling them about the consequences, the health risk and all that.
Now, the reality here is that authorities are pushing for vaccinations because they simply cannot afford another lockdown. The first one in March of 2020 had a huge effect on the country's economy. Food inflation is the highest it's been in 12 years, and unemployment is rising. So authorities here are desperate for more vaccines.
I don't know. I missed you too, buddy. Thank you.
You doing okay?
Yeah, oh yeah, just a little long weekend. It's, since we started this show back in July, I've only actually taken 1 week of time. And then then it was a few days around Christmas, but we've taken the odd long weekend, so we're sort of hitting that place as, a mixture of working from home like everybody knows and all these things go.
Alan Kasuja has been finding out for the latest episode of Africa Daily, our podcast. He's been speaking about it with Adetunji Adesina, scientist in Nigeria, who uses Twitter for work. What difference will it make?
One of the major problems is trying to break into the tech sphere of the Western world. But if you have something in Africa, it's a whole lot easier. It's given the young generation the ability to dream, to know that they
mad. If I just thought he was just some generic bingo caller, it doesn't matter. Fill in the blank, so-and-so's next. Bob, George, Shane, whatever. But that's not how I feel about you.
Oh, thanks, buddy. I appreciate that. That's very kind.
No?
It's incredibly kind.
Maybe it's the pandemic.
And maybe it is. Maybe
talking.
Check to hear what
man, I went for a walk tonight. I just said, I just got to get out of here. I only had 20 minutes of time
Washington Post
to get everything put together. And I was like, I just got to get out of the house. This is crazy. And but I'm feeling it now. I'm feeling it now. And I hear the stories out of Ottawa, because my Melanie's in Ottawa, where she was going to go pick something up, and it was in Gatineau, and she was like, right, I can't even go to Gatineau. There's literally police parked on the bridge to go.
I was going to ask
you,
you were taking your walk in Calgary, no doubt, right?
It's illegal.
Yeah,
I'll park right next to them and start selling drugs. You people got no creativity on how to fight back.
You don't have to worry about like a cop stopping and saying, Well, what are you doing outside? What are you doing?
What are you fucking doing outside? Stupid. Go back to your station.
That's what Ford wanted. He wanted cops just to stop people.
In this city, they got the police
willy-nilly.
station doors
I think
locked.
it was actually in the legislation, willy-nilly, WILLY -NILLY. Anyway, he just wanted cops to stop people, just to kind of remind them that they're supposed to be at home.
Yeah. Yeah, and you had to prove. You had to have a letter proving that you were going somewhere. You know, that was important. It's
He just made that up. That wasn't a part of it at all.
I mean, all of it is so crazy. It should never
That's
have
how
gotten to
rumors
this point.
spread.
But at the same time, I have said
In
all
Ontario,
along,
you
at least
needed
in my
a letter.
opinion, don't put these rules in place unless you're going to enforce them. And now they're doing it. So,
well, you know, it's interesting. I can't remember the last time a premier or a prime minister, but someone in, you know, high authority said the cops would be doing whatever, and within minutes the cops said, "No, we're not.
No, we're not." Yeah,
that's it. I mean, just 5 cop forces within half an hour said, "Stop it. We're not doing that."
Yeah, yeah. No, we got more important things to do.
He apparently is.
That's crazy. I find it amazing.
What are you doing tonight?
We have some amazing stuff tonight, Chuck. I
You
can't wait for you to hear it.
expose
We were going to
somebody
talk
to a
about
harmful situation, and
your
it's $1
workplace
million
making
fine.
you use your phone for work.
Cop sticking his face in my window.
Where they can monitor where you are without you knowing. And we also have the one and the only. I'm trying to talk him into running for prime minister. His name is Kelly Rudy. He's one of my favorite people, and he spends almost an hour with us tonight on the shift.
The former goalie?
Former goalie.
I've never thought of as prime minister. I kind of like the idea. I mean, I like him on TV. I don't know if you think he can make that leap?
I think he can. It's up to him to decide.
Come out of your crease, Kelly. Come out of your... Or whatever. Thanks very much for your time. Glad to see you. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Folks, thanks for making me the luckiest person on earth. This is Charles Adler tonight.
Thanks for calling 1-800-GOT-JUNK. This is Sarah. How can I help?
First I pointed, then the junk disappeared. But the sparkle sound came a little bit late. So I said, you should probably make...
To denounce corruption in Zimbabwe, sexual violence in Namibia, or police brutality in Nigeria. Remember NSAS?
Some of my Nigerian friends were tagging me that we need your voice on this, we need your voice, we need Ghanaians to hear.
That's Malik Ofori. He's a Ghanaian social media influencer with some 125,000 followers.
So I started posting topics. Most of my Ghanaian influencers started seeing the tag and they joined in, and it became big in Ghana as well. So that's one of my proud moments on Twitter.
For him, the fact Ghana was chosen for its commitment to democracy speaks volumes, and actually, he says, sends a powerful message across the continent.
This kind of things is sending a message to other African countries like yours. The internet is a human right. People need internet. We are in the 21st century. Fix your system up. But if you make it hard for us, if you don't give us an ecosystem that will help us, we are not coming to invest in your country. So this is a big message.
Alan Kasuja looking on Twitter's turn to the continent, what the future might take, particularly if it has a Ghanaian base. More on that, Africa Daily, the podcast with Kasuja.
Wait a second. That story gets deeper. Like, oh, fuck, I gotta find that kind of shit.
You're listening to the All News Channel, powered by KCRW.
But that's bacon. Lou's Kitchen, babe. It's the bacon you can cook naked.
Really? Who knew?
Lou's Kitchen double smoked back bacon. Find it today at Sobeys, Wawa's, Walmart, and Metro. Compared to the national brand's 54-gram regular side bacon.
This Sunday morning on Your Life, Your Money, strategies for retiring at age 55, 60, 65, or 70. Regardless of the age you want to retire, you need to have a plan far in advance. Start your planning now and see what factors play into retiring at your desired age when you join Calvin the Money Guy with Chris Creston this Sunday morning at 9. And for advice anytime, go to AskCalvin.ca. That's Ask, K-E-L.
Born in 1950, retired in 2017. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm going to turn it all off because it's all bad.
Few can weather a storm like the one we're in now. Regulated debt relief solutions do exist, and they can help stop interest payments, stop creditors, and roll your reduced debt into one simple payment.
One
Bromwich
simple
Smith, a
payment.
licensed
Because how
insolvency
complicated the
trustee,
payment
is
is
here to
the
help.
problem, right? Oh yes, kill the audio. This is so creative, so creative.
Dates on COVID-19.
This is Global News. I'm Toby Kerr. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says the federal budget is a plan to bridge Canadians and Canadian businesses through the pandemic and towards recovery from the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. But the massive document also contains a number of measures designed to keep the minority Liberals in power, at least for now.
Chrystia Freeland says the government's top priority remains protecting Canadians' health and safety, particularly during the third aggressive wave of COVID-19 infections across most of the country. With that in mind, the budget proposes extending emergency measures, including the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, until September. Beyond the pandemic, the Liberals propose spending more than $100 billion to push economic recovery, including on a national daycare program. There are, of course, tax measures as well, including a digital tax and a luxury tax. The budget also proposes a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour. Terry Pedro, the Canadian Press, Ottawa.
BC and Manitoba are adjusting the age for those eligible for the COVID-19 AstraZeneca shot. The vaccine will now be available to those ages 40 and up. Ontario and Alberta recently announced a similar change, despite 2 people in Canada suffering blood clot-related complications after receiving the shot. The death of an influential Cree teacher due to COVID-19 has increased pressure on Saskatchewan's government to prioritize educators for vaccinations. Victor Thunderchild, who was 55, died in Prince Albert over the weekend. His brother Harvey says Victor's last tweet, sent earlier this month, was directed to Premier Scott Moe, calling for all teachers to be vaccinated.
I think you made a solid statement to Scott Moe to make sure that he looks at the essential workers, the educators, because I have kids. I have a daughter that's an educator.
Scott Moe says his Saskatchewan government will be looking at priority groups for vaccinations in coming days when the general age eligibility drops to people 40 and older. Rogers Wireless says full service has been returned to the vast majority of its customers. It comes after calls, texts, and data services failed for most of Monday and a massive outage starting in the early hours of the morning.
Sergeant Preston of the Northwest Mounted Police entered the Mountie headquarters with the great dog Yukon King at his heels.
Well, hello, Sergeant. When did you get into Dawson from Fort Mile?
About an hour ago, John.
Got here just in time to put up your dog team for the season, too, he is, eh?
Yes, the fall came just about the time I left.
Floyd has gone to the jury.
In closing statements, defense attorney Eric Nelson said it wasn't a lack of oxygen that killed Floyd.
The drug ingestion, right? The bad heart, the diseased heart, the hypertension.
Prosecutor Steve Fleischer told the jury Chauvin had to have known what he was doing to Floyd.
He heard him, but he just didn't listen. He continued to push him down.
Fleischer also pointed out it's all on video.
That force for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, that killed George Floyd. And he betrayed the badge.
Tape from court TV. Chauvin showed little expression. He took off his mask as his attorney presented his closing statement. I'm Ed Donahue.
A psychopath.
In sports, 2 matchups in the NHL's North Division. The Ottawa Senators take down the Calgary Flames 4-2. A couple of goals from Connor Brown in the victory. And the Edmonton Oilers score 4 straight.
They really believe showing any emotion at all would be like somehow inhuman. This robot face, whatever, this psychopathy is somehow considered normal.
Goodbye and good luck, Sean.
To invite a bid from the Russian firm Rosatom for a multi-billion euro contract to build a new unit at the Dukovany nuclear power plant. Czech authorities said they would also no longer consider buying the Russian Sputnik V coronavirus vaccines. The move follows tit-for-tat expulsions.
Great, now you're going to have pro-Russian forces
The
in
former
your
US
country
Vice
saying, why
President
not?
Walter Mondale has died at his home in Minneapolis at the age of 93. Mr. Mondale was President Jimmy Carter's running mate for the successful Democratic.
With Shane Hewitt.
Good morning, good evening. Welcome to The Shift all across Canada. We are here for you, 877-399-9898. That is our phone number at The Shift. You can use that phone number for calls. You can use that phone number for texts. You can reach out, share your thoughts, and join in this conversation that we do all through the night here on The Shift. Coming up, we are going to be joined by Handy Andy Barrar on the shift tonight. We're going to talk a little bit of the DIY. We're going to get into that. Andy he's a gadget guy, but he's also really handy. That's why he goes by Handy Andy. So, working from home, pros and cons of all these things. Plus, we'll ask him how his gardens are doing too, because he has the DIY gardens at his place as well. Also on the show, we have, in case you missed it, with Ryan O'Donnell, and we are joined by the one and only Kelly Rudy, one of the coolest cats in all of broadcasting, one of the coolest cats in all of hockey, and I would say one of the coolest Canadians that you're ever going to find.
Thanks for that. Welcome to Newsday. Claire and Lawrence. Claire's going to be talking to Moscow in just a moment for the latest on the health of Alexei Navalny. Also, we'll be hearing from Will Grant in Cuba on the future of the island after the Castros. Well, the second Castro steps down as Communist Party chief. Also, Lebo de Seco standing by in Minneapolis as the jury retires to consider its verdict in the George Floyd murder trial. And we're in Delhi as well. A week-long lockdown announced after a record spike in cases. What's behind it when India was doing so well not that long ago? All that plus the sport and the business. That's Newsday.
So as Lawrence said, let's start with the latest on the health of the Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. He has been transferred to a prison hospital now as concerns grow amongst his supporters that the Russian opposition leader is dangerously ill and could die at any minute. He's on hunger strike, of course. And Mr. Navalny's transfer came after his doctors warned at the weekend that he is in danger of a heart attack or kidney failure if he doesn't accept treatment. Let's get updated from Moscow now. Our correspondent from BBC Monitoring, Anna Makarchuk. Welcome to Newsday. So what are you hearing there, Anna, about his health?
Alexei Navalny has been on hunger strike since the 31st of March, so it's been over 3 weeks now. And the latest news that he has not been seen by his personal doctor. He last Saturday, his physician reported that his blood tests were critical and indicated a risk of cardiac arrest at any moment, but still there were no reports from any of his physicians. So he's only seen by prison doctors.
He was poisoned by a nerve agent last August. He only narrowly survived, and clearly this is one of the reasons he did not want to be attended to by doctors inside the prison, insisting that he wanted to see his own doctor. So do we know why he has capitulated and what kind of treatment he's getting now?
This is interesting because prisoner doctors share some photocopies of his blood tests, which his personal physicians have access to. However, there's no they do not admit civilian doctors to be seen to Navalny. Just must say that in response, his team announced a nationwide protest demanding his release to take place on the 31st of April, on the same day President Putin is due to address Parliament in his annual major speech.
Yes, so this protest, timed to as you say, to coincide with Mr. Putin's national kind of almost his State of the Union address, if you will. How many people are we expected to see across Russia coming out on the streets? Because we have seen many people taking to the streets in all provinces, haven't we, before now, in support of Mr. Navalny? In January and February, rallies across Russia took place, and many commentators saw them as being the major rallies over the past 10 years. It's not clear yet how many people will attend the rallies today, tomorrow. But however, commentators expect them to be quite crowded. And if I were in Russia now, what would I be seeing? What would I be hearing on Russian media about Mr. Navalny and his health?
Nothing.
Anything at all?
You hear nothing.
It is interesting because state TV networks do not mention Navalny's health at all. However, there are lots of comments in online media and in the press, voicing concerns over the deteriorating health. But again, TV channels they just keep silent on this matter.
So you'll only get it online if you go and look for it. Listen, thank you for the update. And Maklutchuk of BBC Monitoring joining us from Moscow with an update on Alexei Navalny's health. He's now been moved to a prison hospital and is apparently...
As far as we know, the reports on the Rogers outage that left customers without phone service throughout the entire day.
If I'm going to have my service back as soon as possible.
They came in search of answers. Rogers customers whose phones wouldn't work showing up at some retail stores.
No text, no phone call, no internet, nothing.
All day across Canada, Rogers' technical problems meant phone customers under its main brand couldn't talk. Same thing on flanker brands Fido and Chatter.
I used to make a phone call. I had to make a phone call, and then I just couldn't do it.
Rogers revealed little about the reason for the outage, saying in a statement, "We know how important it is to stay connected, and we are working hard to restore services for customers who are experiencing interruptions with wireless voice and data." Adding residential and business wireline internet services are not impacted. We sincerely apologize and thank our customers for their patience.
They should have like a backup.
Frustrated customers went to social media to express unhappiness, provided they could connect.
My wife tried to call to me, to my cell phone, and no signals.
An outage is one thing, not knowing when it'll be fixed made it worse.
I don't know how many minutes I need to wait.
When I'm going to have my service back?
Coming to a store didn't make any difference.
The apology or the polite answer, but no a specific answer. You know, well, let's cross our fingers.
Now, some people haven't had wireless service going on 19 hours today. That's a big deal. A lot of people wanted to make COVID vaccine appointments. They couldn't do that. Many people with work couldn't do their work, unfortunately, as a result of all of this. This is, again, one of those cases where if you've got two phones, one for work and one for personal, why it's so important that they're not with the same provider, because if one goes out, at least you will have another provider to be able to use that phone. We are hearing word that some service has come back in York Region in a very limited way, although Rogers is not taking credit for having this under control yet. Send it back to you.
Yeah, the funny thing to do would actually be to phone Rogers and their customer service, and when they answer and say, "Hello, how can I help you?" the first question you ask them is your computer turned on? Have you tried to restart the router? Have you unplugged the router, waited 10 seconds and plugged it back in again? Maybe try unplugging the router and plug it back in again. Now, that would have been the fun thing to do. Not everybody's happy about it, though. That's for sure. 19 hours, you figure, Ryan?
Well, I fell asleep pretty late last night, and I woke up at noon. It was out at noon, and it didn't come back until just after 7 p.m. tonight, Mountain Standard. So for sure, at least 7 hours, but probably longer while I was asleep.
I meant to check what the next story was on BBC.
But beyond well-known dissidents, many ordinary Cubans are also exhausted at the state of the island. There are long queues for basic goods outside almost every food store in Havana, and the government has scrapped its tangled dual currency system, which has led to rising inflation. Added to that are the coronavirus crisis and the decades-long US economic embargo. It is a bleak economic picture. Outside one store, Havana resident Maria Esther Rodriguez was deeply skeptical that the Communist Party can lift Cuba from its malaise.
The top leadership of this country should go out onto the streets and walk among the people, not just talk. They need to feel what the people are going through. No, I don't think they have the answers. The truth is, this country is in a very bad way at the moment. That's the truth. Oh, look, the police are heading this way.
As Maria Esther was talking, the police interrupted our interview with her, a sign of how hard it is to speak out. Of course, the party still has its loyalists. Another woman in the queue, Olga Sanchez, remains as committed to the cause as when Fidel Castro was in his
There's more British journalists than there are
We are party militants and we love the revolution very much. I don't think I have any suggestions for the leadership because they are so well experienced in how to properly run this country. Just know that we, the Cubans, the true communists, support them.
Our policy as it relates to Cuba is going to be governed by two principles, support for democracy and human rights.
Meanwhile, the Biden administration shows no sign of reviving the Obama administration's thaw with the island, and has chosen, at least for now, not to touch President Trump's hardline policies towards Cuba.
A Cuba policy shift or additional steps is currently not among the president's top foreign policy priorities.
The Cuban Communist Party held its Congress on the 60th anniversary of the failed CIA-backed invasion at the Bay of Pigs. Repelling the Americans that day was perhaps Fidel Castro's finest moment as leader. To mark the event, the government released a video of romantic archive footage of Fidel Castro and another featuring smiling farmers and bountiful harvests.
Did this last year? The American War of Aggression against...
In reality, though, the challenges ahead are daunting. The tourism-based economy is in a perilous state, and the Cuban Revolution's new leaders are far from universally trusted. Amid such disquiet, the island's hardliners may have to accept some significant economic reforms if a post-Castro Cuba is to stay afloat.
Our Latin America correspondent Will Grant on how death or revolution is being a slightly harder sell in Cuba than it was. This is Newsday, 16 minutes past the hour. James Craig's here with the sport. The fallout from the plans for that European Super League rumble on. There were protests inside and outside the ground last night at Ellen Road before Liverpool's 1-1 draw with Leeds, whose players actually warmed up in T-shirts with the message, "Earn it on the pitch."
Listen, anyway, because we've seen what private enterprise has done in long-term care homes in regards to protecting everyone's health and wellness.
Extended care nursing home fire.
And I'm not quite sure that is... I'm not quite sure that's the answer, right? Like, I'm not quite sure that relying on these things is the best way to go. But at the same time, I mean, really, has the government in the last year proven to us that they've got long-term care, healthcare under control, and they can do daycare? Get the connection there? I'm not sure. They're going to have to answer a lot more, I think, to Canadians before that becomes a thing. As part of Canada's post-pandemic economic recovery, the feds are proposing investing hundreds of millions of dollars into climate action. But what does that mean for Canada's oil patch, which is the biggest moneymaker in the country? Eric Sorensen explains.
The aim is to reduce the impact of greenhouse gases across the country, with incentives to decarbonize big emitters like steel companies, interest-free loans for homeowners to make houses more energy efficient, and funding to mitigate against disasters like flooding and wildfires. But if there's one sector that faces the greatest disruption and loss of jobs, it is the Western oil economy. TD Economics calculates 3/4 of oil sector jobs could be displaced by 2050. Ottawa will provide $55 million over 3 years for skills training and workforce planning, part of which will support a transition for worker
They don't have enough oil to sell to last past 2020. Or some shit. They knew they would get about 20 years of making money out of that. Remember, these people believe that you burn natural gas, it makes heat, whatever. The carbon dioxide released from that is somehow insulating the earth and holding in the sun's energy, completely leaving out of the equation the heat from burning the natural gas. This is the mathematics we're dealing with.
Just buy something like Clubhouse, which I think is worth about $5 billion. That would be just small change to Facebook. You know, why bother trying to make it yourself when you can just buy another brand?
It could buy it. It might judge that it can do so organically much better. But I think the main reason it's probably not looking to buy it is antitrust concerns. So, you know, Facebook has been it's currently undergoing a number of probes around the world. You know, where my regulators are saying that it's cloning other people, it's buying other people, and eliminating the competition. So on anti-competition grounds, it might not be a great move for Facebook to make.
Is this a bubble that might burst, though? Because Twitter has announced something called Spaces, which is a bit like Clubhouse, this thing where you can basically listen in to people and talk to people. You've got Apple is supposedly announcing something similar.
Isn't this all a knockoff of the one they were using in Myanmar? Right
even Telegram,
you're chatting
app.
Across Canada.
They were using some shit called Telegram or Telegraph or some shit in Myanmar right before the military took over. Now they're all going to come out with their own version of it.
Which I totally get why people would be confused, because at first it was not as effective. Then it was no good for anybody who was older. These are the communications that came out from the company. Then it was no good for the older folks. Then, by the way, it was good for the older folks, no good for anybody younger than 55 last week. But now some provinces are offering it to 40 to 55. The messaging around AstraZeneca has just been dreadful, absolutely dreadful. And now they're surprised when people aren't showing up to get it. Heather Yurix West reports on which provinces are making this change.
When Brent Cossey turned 40 last month, he never imagined he'd be eligible for the COVID-19 vaccine so soon.
I was thinking probably at the earliest in June. That's
You were 39 when this problem started.
70% kind of vaccinated by then.
India's capital now, Delhi, where there is a week-long lockdown in place. After a record spike in coronavirus cases, government offices and essential services such as hospitals, pharmacies and grocers will be open during the lockdown, which started on Monday night. But many people are still struggling to find hospital places for relatives or even for drugs to deal.
So, yeah, if the British host Freudian slip, spice, India, spice, I mean spike. Yeah, you wonder why people think you're out to take over the world. Jesus Christ. This is so creative. Please keep it up. Hello, mouse. Oh, sakes. I'm gonna light the joint. This is CHOMO's biggest trigger, so this is when everything's gonna go wrong. Watch. I really don't care. I'm still gonna light the joint. Jesus. It amazes me how much effort and time you put into this. I'm gonna just turn the fucking radio back on if this is gonna take this long, bro. Holy fuck, man. You need a real internet connection if you're going to try this hacking stuff. Nice photo there, bro. Yep. Every time I look up, I'm gonna see a different frozen shot of me with my eyes edited shut, my neck bent at some angle that implies I've been choked out. Yeah, keep it up. Well, I'll just wait till you're done. We're back, which brings us. Keep it up. Am I sitting the right way for the mirror to hit it? No. So that brings us back to the title of the video. Refuses to accept that I want nothing to do with this person. This is 30 plus years of this idiot still obsessed. And yeah, that's the type of questions he asks. What have we been at this now? 3 fucking minutes straight? Holy shit, man. You need a real internet connection if you're gonna try to be a hacker. Would that make you happy? You can see what you're doing, like you can see the up and down thing. Like you don't believe when I tell you I can see you're doing it. I know when you're attacking our system, and you don't believe that. Even when I show it to you, you don't believe that. And you yell at me in the street how I'm following you. So creative, so creative. No other child molester ever thought that up before, right? These people have kids. Who the fuck are you?
Yeah. Let's get it, yeah. You need to relax. I don't need no feedback. I'm trying to put my seat back. Don't worry about that other shit. You'll never get it back. Rise like a phoenix from the ashes. Like they said I never do. The ones always talking never got a clue. Who the fuck am I now? Who the fuck is you? Riding with my dogs. We just trying to get this money. You can put that on me, we keep the artillery. If they cross me, then it's R.I.P. It's for my real thugs. The ones that squeeze the thorn and bleed just to smell the rosebud. In search of finer things, maybe God will notice me if I blink. That's what it sound like when the pistols sing. Mama checking the obituary, so she don't see me. She cry when they talk about it on TV. Wake up some mornings and now I'm on a baby. They say the criminal or gangster is all it ever be. Like there's nothing positive in me. I am positive you're not getting rid of me, at least not that easily. Yes. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell the devil he can wait. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell God to look away. He said, what do you want to see? Yeah. I just wake up and crush the day. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell the devil he can wait. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell God to look away. This ain't what he want to see. I just wake up and crush the day. Yeah, they say home is where the heart is, but back home I was living heartless. We all hard-headed, trying to prove whose head's the hardest. If thugging was an art, you could consider me an artiste. Most my friends grew up not knowing who their father is. Nothing in their fridge, you can see their ribs. Yep, this is how we live. Coming from a place that had nothing left to give, nothing left to take. There's nothing on the plate, but I'm dreaming of a state. Everything is stake. I gamble with my life, either 5 stars or behind bars. Love the jobs, we holding on. Pump up, pass it on, cause I feel pain too. What I've been doing, what you've been through, what I feel you, yeah, it's true. Everything outside your window waiting to kill you. You think you know, but you ain't got a clue. Hear me, young Sherlock. Ain't no such thing as a sure shot. It's a cold block, and I just want what you got. It's real talk. Don't make a scene, just give it up. That's how it is. Where the fuck I'm from? Where the fuck I'm from? Where the fuck I'm from? Yeah. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell the devil he can wait. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell God to look away. He said, what do you want to see? Yeah. I just wake up and crush the day. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell the devil he can wait. I got people on my serve on the way. I just wake up and crush the day. In the rush to get paid, tell God to look away. This ain't what you want to see. Just wake up and crush the day. Yeah. I'm the realest, the hottest in the city. Regardless of the city I'm in, getting paid for my rhymes. Black proceeds of crime. When I flow, it's divine. Let me show you how to shine in this moment of time. I need to hold something to know that it's mine. If I slip and I fall, who gon' catch me? If I'ma fuck it all up, or you just gon' stand there and let me with friends like these. These enemies, close my eyes, I don't wanna see. Said most of the world, so it was, so it'll be. Until we wake the fuck up, yeah, I've been a G. But that ain't all there is to me. Me and Lady Luck, we got history. Cause I shouldn't be here physically. Don't even front. If I was gone, I know you'll be missing me. The reaper in the shadows with a sickle glistening. For as long as I can, I'ma leave them there waiting on me. And all this rapper suck, I know y'all been waiting on me. Yeah, mama used to do it, now the boys say the same shit. Putting other families through it, the streets get hectic. They're the only thing you inviting when you in the corner flexing. Like you were Tate, any man come and get.
Was known for robbing trains and things, bringing everybody down for diamond rings and chains. It remains the same in the year you live in. Cause if I pull out the heat, nigga, you gon' kick in. And that's just the rule set by the fool from the old school. When it's time to do, you get 2 men, 2 heaters, 1 street, 1 o'clock, and when it's strike 12, one of y'all gon' drop. If you quick on the drop, you gon' see them all. But if you too slow, I catch you on the down low. No, you really kill, shit's real. Ain't no John Wayne, this nigga gangbang. The 4 horse flip, that's the clip I'm with. You mean the little bitty niggas with the itchy trigger fingers? We on the mission to Kansas, slipping through Texas. We stopped at Bonanza to get us some hot cakes, bacon and eggs. Then we split in the whole house.
He could be the most successful rap star in America. His first album sold 4 million copies. But lately, Snoop Doggy Dogg is spending more time in the criminal courts building than in the recording studio.
There's been no shortage of controversy for rapper Snoop Doggy Dogg. His followers call the Doggy Man to say they're trying to present a positive image in negative times.
Meantime, prosecutors say, so they are not planning to drop murder charges against rap music star Snoop Doggy Dogg.
Prosecutors may have to drop murder charges against Snoop Doggy Dogg.
This is dedicated to the niggas who said gangsta rap was dead. Fuck y'all. I put down more hits than mafioso men. And Lucky Luciano about to sing soprano. And I know the way you feel. And baby bubba, we gon' keep it on the real. Just look at your girl and amazement. I'm a Cuban, so it might get dangerous. Now when it isn't, you can sit on biz out. And let the biz out, whiz out, ride the transact. How you feel? I'm out the ceiling, riding like a villain, making a killer, thrilling the crowd. With my new head, outfits from used. $50 stocks, $100,000 shoes. Man, I get a boost to the sucker MCs. Who you know who I be. Young nigga, I'm a show.
You're not gonna mention.
Hey dog, let me holler at you, man. Word is on the streets, your beats gonna be delicate, straight and shit for speeds out, man.
Delicate beats. So that's what makes me now? Nigga, I don't give a fuck about no beat. Check this out, man. I hear you got some cold things. For real. I got more niggas trying to get at me than the president do sometimes. Niggas be trying to get at me because I be dropping funky rhymes. What the fuck's going on? This rap game's made to make money. Niggas taking the shit out of me, acting way too funny, doing too much. You know what I said from the get-go. What the fuck's going on with you niggas? Y'all trying to play low and trying to be hard and trying to be big willies or whatever they call it. And yeah, it's time for me to act just like an alcoholic. Instead to the game, I'ma stumble in like I don't know. And if a nigga say something wrong, I'm taking up from the get-go. I ain't giving you no room to try to get me first. Cause I've been bombed on before, and I'ma tell you, man, that's the worst feeling in the world. But I'ma keep my thing together, cause I'ma keep making money. Everything is still together, having papers, man. Now what y'all niggas doing? Oh, y'all broke on the corner, drinking y'all drink. Wanna be doing what I'm doing, but don't get mad, cause don't be trying to play hate. Cause I'm taking trips around state to state, representing what y'all wanna represent. But y'all can't represent it, cause y'all ain't got no dollars, no cents. Moving on, and I'm moving, making more moves than the average Cuban. Trying to get G's across the town, trying to make more hits, and trying to get my game tight and get at your bitch. Now, if she wants to get with this, she gon' come holler at her player though. Cause she know that Snoop Dogg has got that white Rolls Royce, and she wants to jump in. Bring a friend, everything is like alphabetic. Come on in and bring a friend, and you can come on back. Cause when you think we gon' be sipping on some cognac, it's on me. I'm feeling good tonight. So I'm gonna do mine and I'm gonna keep everything tight. I ain't letting nothing leak, cause if things leaking, I'm gonna get caught. And I can't get caught, cause you know how they do about that child support. Shit, bitches is cold, nigga. Who ain't got his game tight. Getting 18.5% half your life. Shit. I love my baby boy and all, but I ain't gonna be playing no bitch. No way, dog. No way. I'm too slick on my toes, up too tight. I'm giving to you to get away, instead ain't that right? When you playing this game, you got to be a real player. You can't be that flake ass nigga talking about you want to be the man. Cause if you ain't with the game ain't gonna be with you. And I can put that on everything, including you. One of every 5 black males before the year 2000 will be detained or deceased. No justice, no peace. Yeah, the truth hurts. Be scared, go to church. Nikki, but don't cut it. Hitting 5 points. Step back for a second. I'm feeling with some fire to this joint. The bomb niggas gonna blow up like Atlanta. Atlanta be tripping. Niggas be tripping. I don't be tripping off no nigga at all. No bitches. Just trying to get my money. I don't even be tripping off no switches. I used to like low riders, but now I like east siders. I put them down with me and make them hit makers. You know what I'm saying? I love the Lakers now because now they got Shaq on me. It's time to make $1 million and that's for real. See, we gon' blow up and show up and throw up nothing but dog pound. Give it time to put it down. And we'll be around in your town. So just sit in your seats and wait till we come through. Until we do, just keep smoking gray and blue. Or whatever. Just stay true to what you do. Cause we gon' keep doing what the fuck we got to do with that. Now, understand the instructions. Cause the game's gonna get deep now. Niggas is trying to creep, trying to get up on game, but they don't want to be down with the PG. All of a sudden, everybody want to diss deep man. What we look like? Making y'all diss us. That ain't right. I should get upset. But I'ma stay composed. Chill for a second. Spit at some hoes. Drinking my drink. Smoking my thing. Counting my bank. This shit stink. Stanky bank is what I got, cause I'm gonna keep it. And now this ain't no motherfucking secret. Yeah, we in the drought season. Niggas looking for a raise. It's like Thanksgiving without the face. Yeah, the truth hurts. You're scared. Go to church. They got me running for my life. I'm jumping gates. They got dogs on my ass, but I'm a dog, so I know how to alert and get with that shit. The dog run up on me, I give him a cold like, nigga, back up off me. He turned around and bite the police. Game recognized Snoop Dogg too cold. I'm on my toes. I slide in the back of the garage, dipping with the coat. They went right past me, asked me, have I seen the suspect? Yeah, he went that way. Now I'm finna jet.
Long process, and I think we'll see this is not the end of these commissions. I think they'll be going on. I think the one thing to emphasize, though, is that many of these commissions are an exercise in international diplomacy more than in history of
lives are being encroached on 24 hours a day. Okay, well, let's go back in time. Go back in time to working at a warehouse or at a mill or factory or whatever. You wanted to reach dad.
Child labor in Canada.
Well, the only person who had the boss's phone number was mom. Because if it was an emergency, you could always call the mom, would call the boss.
When did
But
we
aside
get
from
the
that,
right
once
to vote?
dad went to
Plus
work,
all the Koreans that got
or
blew up
mom went to
building the
work, if you
railroad.
flip it on its ear. I mean, you had to wait until your father got home before the conversation happened, which was used always as a threat for us as children. Wait till your father gets home. But that was the thing, right? Like there was no interrupting dad's work on the wrenches on the machine in order to say, hey, dad, can we have pizza for supper? I mean, you had to make a plan in advance, and we lived life differently. So is it completely absurd of us as people to
Yes, again. Yes, I am. Yeah, all right. Well, we'll send it. Late 90s and soon thereafter, reparations from Uganda.
Tuesday, BBC World Service. Now, the impact of the pandemic continues to be felt globally, and women are hit the hardest again and again, facing economic hurdles, declining political participation, and workplace challenges. How do we know this? Well, the latest Global Gender Gap report by the World Economic Forum has shown that the pandemic means
text your partner, your spouse, your kids. And if we take away the cell phone, the personalized part of it, it is the intrusion. So if you were at work and the person who was manning the phones at the workplace kept paging you over the intercom and calling your name saying, Shane, there's a phone call for you on line 3. And then, you're sitting there and you're talking to your kid and it happens 4, 5, 6 times a day. Eventually somebody's going to say, you're here to work. I get the home stuff's going on, but it doesn't seem like it's an emergency. So how do we, minimize the impacts for you? And that's really a proactive approach in the 1980s. This said, when we're considering it now, I guarantee there are employers right now, I don't care what field you're in, who have experience walking past somebody on the job site and that person is hiding their phone like a scared child because they believe that they're going to face some punitive because they were texting again or taking a selfie or swiping on a dating app, whatever it was they were doing. So within that, we unfortunately do actually give teachers this policing duty to take kids' phones away, but we as adults, we don't lead by that example at all. But just
the public rather can see all new vehicles starting from Saturday. 1,000 exhibitors are taking part in the showcase for their latest.
Of the event. So how was the first day?
You know, every 20 or 30 minutes there was an event that was going on in each of the different halls. And so I had to be very strategic with planning out which media events I wanted to attend. The Chinese media were very curious about the Chinese brand. And so I think there was a lot of coverage with BYD, with the NIO, with Hengshi, you know, some of these companies that are brand new and people aren't very familiar with them, right? And then there's also Chinese EV companies that are, you know, a year, 2, 3 years old, but have really stepped up this season or this year with improved vehicles like ArcFox.
So this year's theme is bracing change. What are the change exactly are they referring to?
So I think all of the major Chinese SOEs and OEMs, I think they just have really embraced the electric vehicle. That's pretty much all I noticed for the new product launches. They've also embraced more mature. We're not just talking about the exterior design, but we're talking about the interiors as well, right? The other part of embracing change is that most of these cars are going to be smart. They're going to also have ADAS capabilities or advanced driving assist systems that will help, whether it's parking assist, whether it's active cruise control. This is kind of the coming out party for quite a few of those Chinese brands to reintroduce themselves to the world with these bold and confident products.
So from the launches you just saw, what's your evaluation of the legacy automakers' efforts to keep up with all the changes?
I think it's a balance for the legacy automakers, right? Because let's just make a general statement by saying that the legacy automakers tend to sell more volume here than some of the EV makers for sure, right? Some of the older SOEs. You know, I think the smaller companies, the more nimble companies can really address specific target markets, be a bit bolder with their features, with the design.
In terms of the technologies this year, I think that there's a lot of talks about new driving technologies, you know, involving 5G, involving automated driving. So is there anything excited you find at the event today?
Yeah, you know, it started with XPeng P5, so it's the smaller sedan. I didn't hear that they made announcements on pricing, but I think it's going to be a sub 200,000 RMB vehicle. This plays into the safety aspect, and LiDAR implies safety and awareness. There's no other car companies in the world that are doing that are offering LiDAR as standard in a 200,000 RMB vehicle, right? So those are the types of bold risks that, you know, could pay off.
And that was Tu Li, Managing Director at Sino Auto Insights. You're listening to the Beijing Hour. Coming up in sports, opposition to European football's breakaway Super League.
Want more in-depth reports and behind-the-scenes stories from the
At SOAS, who's been working in Ethiopia for 30 years at least. And Professor, thank you for coming on the program. Can you talk a little bit about the more immediate trigger for this trouble between two of the large ethnic, the Omoro, the largest ethnic group, but also the Amara as well? What's the trigger for this latest trouble? Or is that actually an answerable question?
I think there are various triggers. There was one of the most noted triggers was the killing of an imam as he left, or as he stood in front of his mosque, an Oromo, and that sort of escalated. But there have been other triggers in other localities. The problem is that this is long-standing tensions that have gone on between the Oromo and Amhara people. these three zones within Amhara region Amhara region is ethnically predominantly Amhara, but these three zones have very large Oromo populations. And so there have been long-standing tensions simmering between them. The reason that this violence, I think, has escalated and then has spread into other areas has been a feeling, I think, on the part of the Amhara people that the government, the federal government, has stood by and allowed the violence to escalate without intervening to stop it, and intervening very late.
We've seen in the past land disputes escalate and demonstrations over sort of settlement and so on in this area. Is this related in any way to the story that obviously we've been covering in depth in recent months, the Tigray emergency? Is this reflected somehow in this or not?
I think it's reflected in a couple of different ways. It probably had something to do with why the federal government was slow to respond, because so many of their troops are committed in the north. It's also the feeling of Amhara settlers that Abiy Ahmed, the prime minister, is, because he's Oromo himself, is on the side of the Oromos. And there's not much evidence of that because he's also seems to have been sowing some division within the Oromo population. But I think it could be the fact that the reason that it's gotten so bad could be just sort of spillover in a sense from the unrest in the north.
And you mentioned there Abiy Ahmed. Now his ruling bloc, the political party, has ethnic elements and wings as well. Do they divide along ethnic lines as well? Because he has Oromo supporters and Amhara supporters as well. So what's happening with that sort of political center?
Yes, there are, within the Prosperity Party, which is the party he leads, there are regional factions and sort of sub-parties which are drawn along ethnic lines. And there are Oromo versions and there are Amhara versions. And so those are active within the areas where the violence is taking place. There are allegations that the instigator of the violence on the Oromo side is aligned with a faction of the Oromo Liberation Front, which has been fighting for more than 50 years against the state of Ethiopia. The problem for the Oromos, though, is that these three zones are cut off from the Oromo other territories, and so they can't claim a sort of independence program.
Very interesting. Laura, many thanks indeed. Professor Laura Hammond of SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies.
It's Newsday, BBC World Service. Let's talk more about the European Super League now with James Gregg, who has the sport.
It was the one story that dominated yesterday. Your first job.
Welcome to... From that point of view, I think it is a bit crazy and it's a massive risk. Mourinho.
If you drink, please don't drive. A message from Global News Radio 640 Toronto.
We're here for the night owls.
Joyce, you got me nailed for the stuff you found, but I'm not going to take it for the others. Maybe I stole that stuff, but that was for me. I didn't sell it like the others.
In earlier conversation in the hour, we were talking about AstraZeneca and will you get that vaccine? Because now that some of the provinces have dropped the age groups down in order to get people getting it, Texter says, Michelle says, I'm waiting for Pfizer. Too much contradicting communication about it. I'm not anti-vax at all, but I do have a choice, so I will use it. Very well said, Michelle. And that's Michelle's opinion. There's another one that says, I'm getting the first vaccine I can. I look forward to it. I'm not sure with the lack of clarity about AstraZeneca, but I will get whatever is offered to me. I'm eligible for AstraZeneca vaccine, and I would like to wait. I am eligible for AstraZeneca, and I will get one as soon as I can. Another one says I'm scheduled to get my vaccine on April 30th. Don't know which one it is, but I'll take whatever is available. Some of your comments about the AstraZeneca shots. Yvonne is in London. Now, Yvonne, you've had AstraZeneca. You got it recently?
Yeah, I got it on Friday.
And how'd you feel? Did you get the sore and the tired for a day like everyone talks about?
I wasn't tired or anything any more than usual, but I've got a sore arm. It's still a little tender. And that was, I had it on Friday. Now, I have to say that it took me almost 2 weeks to get an appointment. And I was online doing the online portals of all the different pharmacies here in London that were.
Hadn't pushed or even been invited to be part of it.
No, I would be delighted that they're not invited to this. How are you going to look down on the other clubs that's not in?
Now,
here in London.
Did you find it confusing, all the information with it, or did you just go with the route that says, look, it's time to get something done, let's get going?
Confusing as far as the AstraZeneca and the
efficiency of it and all those things. Yeah, efficiency blood clots. I mean, statistically speaking, the blood clots is so incredibly low. You have more of a chance of getting COVID than you do a blood clot.
Well, I smoke. I mean, I can get a blood clot from smoking. I can get a blood clot from the pill when I was on it. I mean, I'm obviously not on it anymore. So,
obviously.
No, my thing was actually, I was being selfish, of course, my thought, was that because it was only offered to 55 and over, and there was a lot of hesitancy, chances are instead of doing 4-month interval, they'll probably call me early because people weren't getting it. So my pharmacist will say, hey, we have extras. Do you want to get it?
Yeah, well, you know what? That could be a good approach. You might be onto something there. Thanks so much for the call, Yvonne. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, good luck. 877-399-9898. That's Yvonne. She's in London. She's 55 and got AstraZeneca last week. Also in Ontario, Veg, is Lance. Lance, Ontario is a big place, buddy. Can you give us at least an area of Ontario that you're at?
Central. Bradford?
No, cool. So tell me, what are your thoughts about getting AstraZeneca or I'm assuming you're calling for AstraZeneca in particular?
I would not get the AstraZeneca. I would probably get the Pfizer one.
Okay, tell me why.
Well, the reason being the fact that they've changed the goalposts between, the age groups and it lowering it. The fact that it's had blood clots, and I'm immune compromised, and I've had blood clots in the past.
Oh, yeah.
So I would stay away from that one. I would go with the Pfizer. Sorry?
Thank you. No, that's. I mean, being aware of your health and knowing what's best for you, that's fantastic. And I'm glad you said that, Lance. Thank you for the phone call, sir, because the reason why I think it's important that Lance shares that is that, we need to look at our own health and talk to our doctors and ask our doctors the question, by the way, remember when this happened a few years ago? Is this something I should be worried about? And thank you, Lance. I think you just brought that up for everybody. Thank you, sir.
No, he didn't say anybody's doctor.
No problem.
877-399-9898. Here are the numbers from the Canada government website, by the way. BioNTech, 94% short-term efficacy. Data suggests it's 95 over 65. Moderna is 86%. If you look at AstraZeneca, it's 62%. That's between 18 and 64. And the stats that are coming in on the blood clots, ask your doctor. That's the answer, is ask your doctor if it's a problem for you, because statistically you have more chance of getting COVID than you do getting a blood clot. That's based on the stats. Now, there is some interesting information here on this website, and if you want me to send you this link back, it's long, but if you text 877-399-9898, I'll send you back this link so you can do your research. And it does talk about things like what happens if you get Pfizer and then you get Moderna. Does that work? And what happens if you get AstraZeneca? Can you get Pfizer after the fact? And what does the second dose of AstraZeneca do there too? So it's a lot of information. I don't want to get into it too deep because it's out of my lane to try to translate it. But if you read it, I think it will offer you some clarity. And so you can decide what's best for you. And I'm hesitant. I'll tell you right now, I'm absolutely hesitant in all the things because of the communication has changed so many times. At the same time, though, I think in my gut, I know that getting a vaccine is getting a vaccine to get started. And they're talking about boosters after a year anyway. So
talking about giving free heroin to junkies.
All right, thank you very much for your thoughts. Handy Andy Barrar is coming up next here on the shift. We'll get to that and so much more as we start to celebrate. It's almost officially 420. I'm Shane Hewitt.
Let me run with you tonight. I'll take you on a moonlight ride. someone I used to say, but she don't give a damn for me. But let me get to the point. Let's roll another joint and turn the radio loud. I'm too alone to be proud. No, you.
Are we that driven by that we forget about other teams and you know it's gonna trickle down? What happens to women's football? What happens to the other divisions? It'll cause a huge ripple effect.
Well, you're a romantic. Of course you are. You're a Manchester United supporter. I can see the appeal despite not being a Red myself. Dhruv Raja, many thanks indeed. Chair of the Manchester United Football Supporters Club of Kenya, with his message for Ed Woodward and others.
Do text us if you have a view on that. +44 77 86 20 50 85. This texter says, how long before one or more of these clubs relocates from Europe to Asia to make money? Relocations to US sport take place regularly for the financial benefit of club owners. You're listening to Newsday on the BBC World Service. Now, let's update you on that fire very close to, and in fact it engulfed, the University of Cape Town. It destroyed an important library there, and it housed priceless African studies collections. We spoke to the mayor of Cape Town yesterday. At that time, he was hopeful that there wouldn't be too much damage. But let's get an update now from the Executive Director of the University of Cape Town Libraries, Ujala Satgor. Ujala, we now know more, don't we, about what was lost? What can you tell us?
Good morning, and thank you for having me this morning on your show. Yes, I think with each day passing, we are beginning to know a little bit more about what has transpired, what's possible, what's not possible, what could be salvaged or what not. We can definitively say that at this point in time, the reading room, the Jagger reading room, was completely gutted, and the materials therein, that is in the major part of the reading room, the galleries, the workspaces and workstations, have all been completely destroyed. A major part of this area was host to the African Studies Library, the book collection, as well as the African Film Collection, a unique collection of its kind in the world of over 3,500 African-produced, directed movies, etc., films. The African Studies book collection, the print book collection, was not in its entirety within the Jagger reading room per se, because we also have parts of the collection in other off-site collections and in the basement stores. But we can. Well,
it sounds like very, very unique collections you're talking about here, without copies.
Yes.
They're pretty irreplaceable. Is that what you're saying?
The film collection is not replaceable. That we're very, very sure about. The books have been sourced over a period of years since 1953 by people who traveled through the continent. We've been given gifts of books, etc. There were very unique items within that collection. There's a very unique school textbook collection that was donated to the library. The late 18th century.
Sorry, time is against us. We will have to leave it there, but thank you for the update. Ujala Satgor from the University of Cape Town Libraries, Executive Director.
Don't use L's, you use fairies.
What makes you say that?
Then the junk disappeared, but the sparkle sound came a little bit late. So I said, you should probably make that sparkle sound a little bit quicker.
And then what happened?
And then Charlotte materialized out of thin air and said,
never hesitate to trade your...
Then consider donating your old one to KCRW. You'll be supporting that unique public radio station and getting a nice tax write-off to boot. For details, visit kcrw.com/cars.
But what do I say? Have you... Did you like it?
Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to just drive to the next window for your order, because there are people waiting behind you.
Oh, yeah, sorry. The next window. Yeah, right over there. Thank you.
Looking for tips on how to talk with your teens about cannabis? Visit drugfreekidscanada.org for more tools to help start the conversation. drugfreecanada.org.
We believe in a greater Toronto. This is CFMJ Global News Radio 640 Toronto, a Chorus Entertainment Company.
This is Global News. I'm Toby Kerr. The first federal budget in more than 2 years extends government support for workers and struggling businesses another few months as it aims to pull Canada through the pandemic. It includes $100 million in new spending.
We have a profile of the country's new leader from a new revolutionary generations, more managerial business and, of course, sport. With more on that Super League breakaway. Hello, I'm David Harper with the BBC News. President Xi Jinping of China has used a keynote speech to criticize what he called the unilateralism of certain countries at the expense of the UN-centered global order. Our correspondent Stephen
It plans to design a new tax incentive for the carbon.
No change in the trend towards a multipolar world. However, China's leader then went on to speak about the threats to multilateralism in what appeared to be a criticism of the United States and its allies. He said world affairs should be handled through extensive consultation and the future decided by all countries working together, adding that the world should not let the rules set by one country or a few countries be imposed on us.
Jurors have adjourned for the night in Minneapolis after spending 4 hours considering their verdict in the trial of Derek Chauvin, the white former U.S. police officer accused of murdering the black man George Floyd. Larry Madowo has the details.
They have to look at these 3 charges and arrive at a unanimous verdict. The 3 charges are second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. And if even one of them is not convinced,
are following the guidelines.
The Alberta border telling travelers not to enter BC unless it's essential. The wife of Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Andrew Furey has stepped up to help Ontario battle its soaring COVID-19 case numbers. The Premier, who's a surgeon himself, Dr. Alison Furey, has been working on the front lines in a St. John's COVID-19 assessment unit and that she's eager to help out in Ontario. Premier Furey told reporters today he expects to work out a plan for sending more workers to Ontario within the next 24 hours. The province is clocking over 4,000 cases of the virus a day. A medical examiner revealed the cause of death for a police officer who died following the January siege on the Udall building.
Medical examiner Dr. Francisco Diaz announced Monday Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick died of natural causes 1 day after a violent mob stormed the U.S. Capitol, saying it was a stroke that killed the 42-year-old. Sicknick collapsed January 6th and died in the hospital the following day. The United States Capitol Police releasing a statement saying they accept the findings, but that it does not change the fact Officer Sicknick
transport these people by military. Oh, you're so creative.
Carbon-intensive fuel is set to rise by 4.5% in 2021.
The president of Real Madrid Football Club has defended a controversial plan to form.
So all these workers that are going to travel are going to be transported by the military. CHOMO seems to have a vested interest in you not hearing me say that. Yeah, keep it up, keep it up. That's his big hack. That's his huge, incredible hacking skills there.
5-2, the Nashville Predators take down
the pharmaceutical industry and representatives from the World Health Organization. Organizers of a long-established community food bank in the Philippines say they've been forced to suspend operations to protect volunteers from government harassment. The initiative said it had been wrongly accused of links to communist rebels, a practice known as red tagging. Howard Johnson reports from Manila.
The Take What You Need initiative, which offers basic food staples to the poor during the country's worst recession since World War II, has garnered widespread praise in the Philippines. But its founder, who is openly critical of President Rodrigo Duterte's government, says she is now afraid to visit the project because of what she says are baseless accusations against her. Critics of red tagging say it is similar to the McCarthyism of 1950s America, where prominent leftists were labeled communists and accused of subversion.
The dispute comes as COVID-19 cases continue to rise in the Philippines, leading to renewed criticism of the government's response. The Executive Committee of Angela Merkel's CDU party has backed its leader, Armin Laschet, to be the Conservative candidate to succeed her as German Chancellor. 31 board members backed him against 9 for his rival, Markus Söder, who leads the CDU's Bavarian sister party, the CSU. The former US Vice President, Walter Mondale, has died at his home in Minneapolis at the age of 93. Mr. Mondale.
These motherfuckers live to be damn near 100.
Hey, we're going to welcome Andy Barrar to the shift. That's like to me, that's an Andy Barrar Vegas song right there. And Sean Paul and We Do Vernon. So happy 420. You are a DIY and a gadget nerd like no tomorrow. And so we might as well get into some of the home gardening conversation of the world of Andy Barrar. And of course,
Conklin is when it comes to giving people time off.
In a country that allows you to grow your own cannabis, up to 4 plants. So everything we're going to talk about is completely legal here because we're exercising our rights as Canadians.
Before we move on to that, I will say you are, from my understanding, you've got the sunflowers and you are particularly proud of those. I did want to acknowledge the sunflowers.
I do have, yes. They're called giant Russian mammoths. So they grow up to about 10 feet, I believe. And I got a head start this year, Shane. I started growing them indoors on March 2nd. If anybody wants to see it, I got one. His name's LeBron. Go to my website, andymedia.com. Go to the blog section. I just posted a little video. I'm going to keep taking photos of LeBron every week. He is going to get really, really big this year. I'm feeding it really good too. Got mushroom manure, watering. It's like got the whole package to become the ultimate sunflower.
So you've already started now in your climate here in Canada. You can start early.
You said you were talking about weed.
As President Xi said, the world should not let the rules be set by one country or a few countries and shouldn't let them be imposed on others. Our Beijing correspondent Stephen McDonald is here to read the runes. Stephen, what's he been saying and where? Well, it was at a business forum, the Boao Forum. It's kind of like a Chinese version of Davos, which is held every year. Due to the coronavirus, though, many of the presentations this year, including his presentation, have been via video link. Now, what he said was pretty clearly aimed at the US and its allies. I mean, no countries were mentioned. But when he said that world affairs should be handled through extensive consultation and the future decided by all countries working together, not letting the rules set by one country or a few countries, it's pretty obvious who he was talking about. You know, he started off speaking about how actually the trend towards a multipolar world continued, but then sort of went on to speak about the threats to that, the threats to so-called multilateralism. Now, of course, you know, in the Trump era, there was a lot of criticism of the Trump administration moving the US away from these multilateral institutions. Well, Xi Jinping was saying that we must safeguard the UN-centered, United Nations-centered multilateral system. The reason for this now is that many Western countries, the governments of those Western countries, have been criticizing China recently over its human rights performance, especially in places like Hong Kong and Xinjiang. And I guess this is his way of saying, well, you should sort of butt out, because really this requires sort of all countries in the world to sort of have a unified position on things like whether or not China is mistreating ethnic Uyghurs in Xinjiang, and obviously China doesn't think it is. So, yes, a pretty strong attack in a way on the West at this business forum. And of course, one of the things that we've been paying great attention to is the talk between the climate change envoy from Joe Biden and his equivalent, looking at sort of how they can collaborate. So here he is saying, you can't impose all your standards on us. talking about human rights and things like that, and then on the other hand want us to collaborate in a joint project as well. So what does it mean for that very important issue of whether China is going to collaborate with other powers over climate change?
Well, funnily enough, Xi Jinping would say it's all part of his broad argument that this requires a multilateral response, that countries need to cooperate on ameliorating climate change. The only way to do it is with all countries sort of coming together. Interestingly, though, he did stress, though, this shared but different responsibility that every country has in terms of climate change. Now, this does get to one of the more contentious aspects of the issue, though, because there has been criticism of China that it's really effectively not a developing country anymore, but a developed country. I mean, it's one of the world's two greatest economic powers, and yet has been given, under these sort of climate targets, room to still keep emitting more and more carbon, and it is one of the biggest emitters of CO2 on the planet. So, on the one hand, he's saying we should all sort of get together and countries should cooperate to
but not much radioactivity,
fix the climate problem, and yet he is defending this idea that developing countries, in inverted commas, should be given more leeway to keep emitting more carbon, and that the developed world, i.e., the US, Europe, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, and the like, they're the ones that should be taking the big hit in terms of reducing their carbon emissions.
So that's one of the messages to take away from that. Thank you very much indeed. Interpreting the latest statement, I suppose, of Xi Jinping thought. That was our Beijing correspondent, Stephen McDonnell.
Newsday BBC World Service. We're going to update you on the situation in Delhi shortly. They started a week-long lockdown just yesterday to try and get on top of this spike in COVID infections, hospitals being overrun, oxygen supplies running desperately low. So we'll cross to our correspondent there to get you an update. But first, we're going to take you to Cuba. There's been a very historic change taking place there. So we wanted to spend a few minutes taking a closer look at Miguel Diaz-Canel, the current president and head of state. He has now replaced Raul Castro as leader of the ruling Communist Party, and it's the first time a Castro hasn't been in charge since the revolution in the 1950s. William Leo Grande is a Latin American expert and professor at American University in Washington. He told me a little bit more about Mr. Diaz-Canel.
He's a career politician, if you will. He's worked his way up through the ranks of the Communist Party. He spent 13 years as a provincial first secretary in 2 different provinces before he was brought to Havana as a minister of higher education. And then he was put on the political bureau, and he became also a vice president in the government. And so he's gradually worked his way up through different institutions of the political system, and he's therefore regarded by the leadership as a very seasoned, experienced person. In public, he seems rather stiff and formal. He doesn't really have a lot of personal charisma, but in a small group, I'm told, I haven't met him myself, but people who have met him say that he's very personable, very open, and that he has a good sense of humor. Clearly, he has the confidence of Raul Castro and the other senior leaders who have now stepped down, and they have passed the torch to him.
This is the end of the Castro era, as you say. What kind of leadership do you think he will bring?
Well, his favorite hashtag is "We Are Continuity." And the theme of the Party Congress just concluded was the Congress of Continuity. And I think what they're signaling there is that he is going to continue with the basic policies that Raul Castro has been following. Most importantly, the economic reform program that Raul Castro introduced back in 2011. That program is only about half done, and it aims to really transform the Cuban economy into a kind of market socialism. And he has focused on making that his top priority because the Cuban economy is really in difficult straits these days.
It really is, isn't it? I mean, we've seen the economy shrinking by 11% last year, and sanctions that have rolled on and got worse under the former president of the United States, President Trump. There's a different administration in there now. What do you think, though, he is likely to do? Because life is not easy for your average Cuban at the moment, is it?
No, it's certainly not. And I think he is going to follow on from the Party Congress exhortation to the party faithful to really push ahead full steam on these reforms. The reason they've been going so slowly is because there's been a certain amount of bureaucratic resistance, people in the party and in the government who don't want to lose the privileges that they have had under the old system. But it's really kept the Cuban economy from growing significantly. One of the real themes in the Party Congress was making state enterprises efficient. And that's really where the core of the economy's problem lies. It's been hit hard by these external shocks, the Trump administration, the pandemic. But at the end of the day, if the state sector of the economy isn't made more productive, they're never going to get out of the economic rut that they're in.
What would be a measure of his success then? Are Cubans fed up with the way their day-to-day lives are, with queuing for food, not being able to provide a decent standard of living for their families? Is the pressure coming from the people, first and foremost?
Absolutely. There's no question about it. The Cuban economy has not been in good shape since really the 1990s and the collapse of the Soviet Union. The economy has been the #1 issue on the mind of Cuban people, as we've seen in a number of independent public opinion polls. And the situation being so difficult right now has increased discontent even more than usual. And it's also greater visibility of inequality, right? They've just opened these stores that only accept hard currency debit cards. So if you're a Cuban who doesn't have access to hard currency through remittances or through your employment, there are serious shortages of basic consumer goods that you just can't find in the peso stores.
That's William Leo Grande, Latin American expert, professor at American University in Washington, on whether the new man in charge of the Communist Party there, Mr. Diaz-Canel, can turn around the fortunes of the country and improve the lives of ordinary Cubans.
Sport now, James Craig.
Thank you very much. The superstorm around the Super League rumbles on. There were
protests.
And work on the beach. And I think that's a viable option for a lot of people who have decided. And, there's a lot of people who even got jobs during the pandemic, got completely onboarded online, have never stepped into an office. And imagine that. You can work for a company and you've never physically met any of your employees. And there are thousands of people that have done that. And it's quite remarkable.
Well, that's this show. If you go back in time, Jason Manauis, Sunshine Sparkle Pants, who produces the show, produced the show for a segment of time after Chris Gilbert left. So Chris Gilbert got hired as a contract, as a temporary contract. That's how we met him. And then he came and he produced the show for months. I've never met Chris face to face, ever. Now Ryan and I, we've spent time because of, we're in the same city, so we did see each other. And plus I drop off whiskey at his house. But Brendan, I've never met Brendan. And then so much so that even Matt and Chris had never met, and all of these things. So yeah, to your point, in a business, it's like, well, can you have the meeting online and meet the people that way? Yes. Okay, then you don't have to go there. Now, some deals are better to meet the people and sit face to face and sort of feel it out. Those things I would imagine will still happen because there has to be some humanity to some of these deals. But I think you're right, man. Like some of these things, it's never going to go back.
Were you able to build relationships though when you haven't met the people in face to face? Because that's one of the big challenges, and that's why I think stuff like Zoom will stay around, because it is way better to be able to look at somebody at least over a screen than talk on a phone when it comes to building that kind of relationship.
You're looking at me.
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at Chris left the job to go with his partner and move halfway around the world, and he's still on the show. So I would say that the answer to that is yes. I see more people like this than I do anywhere else nowadays. So I think it's great. I think it's interesting. I would hate to be in the business of commercial real estate right now. I think that's a pretty scary realm. And a lot of that's going to change. But in this world of needing housing, there could be opportunity there too. So we'll see what happens.
I agree with you. I think you're going to see a lot of open spaces in major cities like New York because of this.
I'm going to send you some links here that have been sent to me. HandyAndyMedia.com. These links that are coming your way, Andy, are from Steve. And Steve has a bunch of links and articles on to take your marijuana